Olivia, who is a professional dancer, former Las Vegas showgirl, who is the founder of Yoga for First Responders, which teaches yoga to police, fire, EMTs, first responders. She loves animals, especially her dog. So last but not least, Olivia.
In 2008, I was living in Las Vegas, and I was working as a classic Las Vegas showgirl. And it was everything you're probably imagining it to be. Big feather headdresses, rhinestones, G-strings, big bright lights, big bright colors, big bright red lipstick, fake eyelashes, the whole 9 yards. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of hard work. We danced 12 shows a week, but I was doing it with some of my best friends, and we were having a blast on stage and off. And on stage, my friends looked gorgeous. They were beautiful, and I looked beautiful. And that was really the whole concept behind the showgirl, is celebrating the beauty of a woman. At the end of the show, this big staircase would come down on stage, and showboys in top hats and tuxedos would escort us down the stairs as we'd wear $10,000 costumes dripping in Swarovski crystals, and the audience would be on their feet applauding just in awe. And I felt so special, so beautiful, so royal, like a princess. It was pure glamour. My home life, however, was anything but glamorous. I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and he was a musician, a jazz musician, and an unemployed jazz musician. And if you want to know the depths of human darkness, spend some time with an unemployed jazz musician. He and I had met in 2006 when we were both working on the national Broadway tour of The Producers. He played in the orchestra pit, and I danced on stage. Now, the theater world, the musical theater world specifically, there's an abundant amount of beautiful single women. But it's very hard to find a single, straight, moderately good-looking man to date. So when this single, straight, good-looking, and talented man winked at me from the orchestra pit, case closed, I was his girlfriend right away. Now, right in the beginning of our relationship, right when you're in that honeymoon phase, I started to notice some red flags. At that point, your partner does no wrong, right? You're just totally enamored with them. But I seemed to be doing everything wrong. He was taking things out on me. He was blaming me for things that I had nothing to do with, and his emotions were very extreme up and down. And when I did a little bit of research on this, it seemed like classic bipolar disorder. So you'd think I'd break up with him when I started to see these red flags. But as I said, the theater world is very small, and even more so, my world on tour was even smaller. 30 people that work together, travel together, and live together. So if I were to break up with him, it would be very public, it would be very embarrassing, and I would risk him dating one of the other beautiful single women in my cast right in front of me, and I didn't want that to happen. So I just didn't tell anyone how I was being treated. And I made everyone think that I was in a really good relationship so I could save face and I could endure. So eventually I got the job in Vegas, and he followed me out to Vegas because he thought that a musician of his caliber would have no problem getting a job out there. Well, what we didn't know was that the musician circle out there is very small, and like the same 10 musicians play all the shows in Vegas. And someone would literally have to die for a spot to be open for him. So he found himself unemployed, and this behavior that I noticed on tour only got worse and more extremes. The ups and downs had more downs, and the downs were lower, and they were nastier. And he was even more cruel to me. So now you'd think I'd break up with him. But at this point, I was too far in. If I broke up with him now, I'd have to admit to my friends and family that I'd been lying about my relationship for this long. And also, I was getting older. What if there was no one else for me? What if this is my relationship and this is what I have to endure? I didn't want to be a fair-weathered girlfriend. I wanted to stick it out. So that's what I did. And that was my life. By night, I was a beautiful showgirl who was admired by so many people. And during the day, my life was dark, bleak, resentful, and I felt small, and I felt ashamed. And this is how I lived. I would leave every day for work around 6 o'clock. And one of these times, I opened my front door, and I saw the most beautiful thing I think I have ever seen. And my heart nearly jumped out of my chest with joy as this ray of God's light came down in front of me as these two little puppy ears and this little puppy face came galloping towards me. And she had this dark, beautiful, stripy brindle color. She couldn't have been more than 3 months old. So I knelt down and she jumped into my arms and she started licking my face like she hadn't seen me in years. Then she jumped out of my arms, into my house, up my stairs, into my bedroom, and literally under the covers of my bed. Now this is like a dream come true, right? A puppy just ran into my house, but I was also running late for work and I didn't really have time for this. So I went up and I got the puppy, and I got her in. I looked outside to see if anyone was gonna claim her. And at the same time, my neighbor poked his head out and he's kind of looking back and forth, and I said, "Does this dog belong to you?" And he said, "Oh yeah." And I brought her back and I said how much I admired her, and he said, "Oh yeah, I just let her out to potty." And I was thinking, well, this is kind of weird dog owner behavior to let such a young dog out to potty without a collar in the middle of a busy neighborhood. But I gave her back and I said how beautiful she was, and he told me that her name was Lil Mama. So this was happening for several weeks now with Lil Mama. I'd go to work and I'd open my front door and she'd either run into my house or I'd open my car door and she'd run into my car. And every time I'd have to pick her up and I'd have to bring her back to my neighbor. And one of these times he said to me, "Yeah, do you want her? We gotta get rid of her." And again, this caught me off guard as unusual dog owner behavior to just give your dog away to the neighbor. And I said, well, I have to think about this because I wasn't in a position to have a dog. I didn't make a lot of money as a dancer. I had a volatile home life. I didn't want to enter something else into it. So I told him I'd think about it. But he kept hounding me. He would text me or call me or see me and said, "Do you want her? We gotta get rid of her." And I didn't really know what getting rid of her meant. And he wouldn't explain it and it didn't sound good to me. So I thought, well, at the very least, I could take her on and find her a good home that I felt comfortable with. And so that's exactly what I did. And I took her on tax day. And I remember it was tax day because it was pure chaos. I had to get my tax extension in by 5 p.m. at the post office. I was running late for work. And the little puppy must have been nervous because she was peeing all over the house. And of course, my boyfriend was mad and yelling at me because she was peeing all over the house. It was chaos. And I went to work that night totally defeated. And I said to my girlfriends in the dressing room, I said, "This was a huge mistake. I have to find her a better home as soon as I can. I shouldn't have taken this dog on." I get home that night, and she had calmed down. And I kind of melt down into the rug, and I cross my legs. And she tiptoes over, and she falls asleep in my lap. And I ended up finding her a good home with me. And that's when Lil Abby turned into Abby. Or Lil Mama turned into Abby. So now Abby was my dog. And Abby was the light of my life. We did everything together, and I trained her really, really well because my dad taught me how to train dogs from my dog growing up. So I taught her how to sit and how to stay and how to come and down, and she knew tricks. She could roll over and she could play dead, and she even went potty outside in the backyard wearing a collar by herself and would come right back. She was also my only ally. since I didn't tell people what I was enduring at home in my relationship, there was no one there to comfort me. But Abby was there to comfort me. So when my boyfriend would yell at me and get very upset, and he would say things to me like, "I hate you," and "you're stupid," I would usually run upstairs to my bedroom, and I'd sit on my bed and I'd start sobbing. And Abby would be right on my heels, and she'd come right up, and she'd sit right in front of me, and she'd be shaking, and she'd be looking at me in the eye, and she'd be licking me or laying on my neck, trying to make me feel better. I remember her fur being soaked with my tears. And I hated seeing her so nervous and upset because I was upset, but there was something so beautiful about her trying to take my pain away. Eventually, my boyfriend did get a job, and it was to go back on tour with another Broadway show. And he took it immediately, without any hesitation, even though it meant that he would have to leave me, his girlfriend, for a whole year. He started to make his preparations to leave, and while he was making his travel plans, he told me that he didn't think that I could take care of Abby by myself. He thought that it would be better that maybe she lived with his parents in Florida, where she would have a big backyard. And, I didn't make enough money, I was going to be dancing all night and not home enough, and that it was better for her if she lived with his parents. Now, I didn't like the way this felt, except that I didn't want to be selfish. I didn't want to sacrifice her happiness for me, and just so I could be happy. And he said it would only be temporary, that once he got off of tour, we could get her from his parents' house, and we would move back to New York together and be there as a family with Abby. So I agreed to let her go, and that it would be best for her, and it would only be temporary, and that she could live with his parents in Florida. So the day came for them to move and leave, and I hugged and kissed him goodbye and hugged and kissed her goodbye, and I went to work that night. And I couldn't find the same joy that I found on stage normally. I was kicking my legs, and I had my makeup on, I was smiling, but tears were rolling down my face. I felt empty and hollow and alone. I went home that night, and when I opened the door, my home reflected the emptiness that I felt in my gut. Not only were his travel bags gone, but everything he owned was gone. And so I started calling him and texting him, and he wasn't answering back, or if he did, it was very short and cold answers. And then it hit me over the head. This veil of illusion that I was in any sort of real relationship was lifted. And I had this epiphany. He didn't just leave for a job. He left me. And he tricked me into taking my dog with him. The rage and anger of betrayal boiled up inside me to a point where I couldn't feel my face or my hands. And I looked down and I saw one of Abby's chew toys. It was a red rubber tug-of-war toy. And it had two sides, one for your hand and one for her mouth to play tug-of-war. And it still had her little bite marks in it. Now, I'm not a mother, so I don't know what maternal instinct feels like, but I think I might have gotten a glimpse of it in this moment, because it felt like a claw came from my gut and grabbed my trachea and pulled me to the floor. And I surrounded this chew toy and started crying and rocking it like I was trying to comfort it and make it feel better, like it had also been betrayed and it missed Abby. And I was finding this camaraderie with this inanimate object. And I was sick of it. I was sick of being treated this way. I was sick of being stepped on, and he had gone too far. I was going to go get my dog back. So I had a month to plan how I was going to do this puppy napping. And the reason I had a month was because he had decided to spend a month at his parents' house before he left for his job on tour. Now, he had never been physically abusive, but I feel like taking a dog right from under his nose might push him over the edge, and I didn't want to be there to find out. So I was going to wait till he went back out on the road. And during this month, I was able to make the plans and get all my ducks in a row. So first I contacted her vet and Petco, and I got all the receipts to show that I had paid for her life. I contacted local law enforcement, and I contacted law enforcement in Florida, where his parents were living, to see how far I could go to collect my own property before I was the one that got arrested. And I also contacted my aunt, who is my godmother, and her wife in Florida. They live 45 minutes away from his parents, to see if they would help me execute this mission. And yes, they said, of course. Now, side note, if you plan on puppy napping, I highly recommend you bringing a lesbian with you. They're gonna have a hatchback or a sport utility vehicle of some sort. They're gonna love dogs, they always do, and they're not gonna mind screwing over a man. So, I was set there. Another thing I was doing during this time is I was calling his parents, because I wanted them to know I still considered Abby my dog, and that I cared about her and her well-being and how she was doing. And I found out a couple things during this time. I found out that my boyfriend had never asked them if he could bring Abby. They were surprised when she showed up at the airport. I also found out that he had offered them no compensation to take care of her or even to buy her food. And also, even though she was a great dog, they weren't at a time in their life to be taking care of a young puppy. You know, they were in their late 60s, and puppies are like babies. This is not something they wanted to do. So this made my job easier. So it was time for me to travel to Florida and go through with this puppy napping. And you'd think I'd be nervous. I thought I was going to be nervous, but I wasn't. I was on a mission. I had a one-pointed focus. Abby was always there for me when I was vulnerable, when I needed someone, when there was no one else to comfort me, and she was there. When she was vulnerable, when she needed someone to protect her, I wasn't there. I let her go. I let her be taken. And I was going to right that wrong. So I got to Florida, and I called his parents, and I said, I'm in town, I'm visiting my aunt, and I'd like to see Abby. So they agreed. And my aunt and I caravanned to their house. And my aunt parked at the bottom of the hill of her street, and I went up the rest of the way to the house. And when I went into the driveway and I pulled up, they were already at the front door and with Abby on a leash. And I looked at her, and she looked different. It's amazing how fast puppies can grow in just a month. And then she saw me, and she started to get excited. But as soon as I got out of the car, she kind of noticed my energy and picked up on my energy a bit. And she was like, oh, we're on a mission. We got a job to do. It was like, I'm getting rescued right now. So she got very still and stoic. And I walked up and I said, hi, I'd like to take my dog for a walk, please. So they handed me the leash, and I took Abby's leash, and we started to walk away from the house. And we're walking, and that walk starts to turn into more of a fast walk. And the fast walk starts to turn into a trot. And I turn, and as soon as the house is out of sight, that trot turns into a full-on run. And we're running down towards my aunt's Subaru out back, and we're running. And I let go of the leash, and I'm like, go, Abby, go, go, go. And my aunt lifts up the hatchback, and Superman style, Abby jumps into the back. Hatchback goes down, my aunt goes around to the front and drives off. And that's when I realized we forgot to set a meeting point. But this was the age of cell phones, so we could figure that out later. I turned on a dime, and I marched back up to the house. Now is when I started to get nervous. The mission had been completed, Abby was safe, and now I had to go confess. I had to tell the truth. So I started to get a little shaky and sweaty. I started to cry a little bit. And I got back up to the front door, and I knocked, and they were very surprised to see me back so soon, and without the dog. And I looked at them and I said, the real reason I'm here is your son and I are breaking up, and I'm taking my dog back. Well, I didn't know what was going to happen now. Were they going to yell at me? Were they going to throw a punch? Were they going to call the cops? You know, so I braced myself. They invited me in for tea to talk about it. Apparently, having a woman break up with their son in such a dramatic way wasn't a surprise to them. So back at my aunt's house, Abby got to sleep in bed with me that night. And she slept in a way that she never had, and she hasn't since. She slept above my head on the pillow like a halo shape, with her head resting right on my shoulder. And that's when I realized I didn't just rescue my dog that day. I rescued my own self-worth. Abby had shown me what true and pure, unconditional love looks like, and that I deserved it, and I was worthy of it, and I wasn't going to stop until I found it. And I have found it. Thank you.